How can you avoid probate? Hello, I'm Attorney Thomas Burton, and that's today's question. So I was perusing common estate planning questions and articles online, and I came across this article from NerdWallet, which, if you've heard of it, is a financial budgeting, financial planning website. And the question presented was, how do you avoid probate? And if you've tuned into the channel, you've heard me talk about using trusts and other ways to avoid probate. But here's the 5 ways NerdWallet lists to avoid probate. 1, have a small estate. Most states set an exemption level for probate, offering at least an expedited process for what is deemed a small estate. So they're right about that. And in Wisconsin, the small estate limit is $50,000. So when I'm working with clients, I remind them that if they can keep all assets subject to probate below $50,000, even if there was something they forgot to put inside of their revocable trust. I'm talking about, let's say we're putting together a revocable trust and they later get one item, but it's worth $20,000. If you can keep any assets outside of the trust below that, you could use this alternate transfer by affidavit to transfer it without the need for a full probate. The same if your total assets are below $50,000, you could possibly plan to use this, but you have to make sure probate assets are below that limit. So one way you could avoid probate assets is to make payable on death beneficiaries on your bank account. But for many people, if you own real estate and you have equity in the real estate, significant equity, often you're going to be above that $50,000 limit right there. 2, they say you can give away assets while you're alive. And that's true. If that's a form of planning you want to do simply to avoid probate, you could give away your assets while you're alive. But I would caution you about that so you don't run out of money to live on while you're alive. And the second thing to watch out for there is if you're giving away assets and then you need to apply for Medicaid, government assistance for long-term nursing home care. Currently in Wisconsin, the average cost of nursing home care per month is around $8,000 per month, give or take a little depending what county you're in. That's private pay care. But if you're giving away assets and you do that within 5 years of applying for Medicaid, they're going to penalize you for giving away assets and impose a penalty period on you equal to the amount of the gift. So if you give away $100,000, $8,000 a month, that's about $96,000. They're going to say you got to private pay for your nursing home care for about a year. That's just a rough estimate. There's a complicated formula. But what I'm saying is if you give away the asset, they penalize you. They don't penalize the person you gave the money to. So if you're super wealthy, giving away assets might work because you still have plenty of money left, but then you're going to be over the probate limit. You're going to have more than $50,000. So I recommend you look at using a trust to avoid probate. But anyway, be aware if you wait till the very end of life to give away assets. So in my opinion, that's not a great method to give them away while you're alive, unless you plan you never need Medicaid, or maybe you have long-term care insurance that covers the entire cost, or someone living with you who will always take care of you. 3, establish a living trust. So if you've watched some of my videos, living trust is the primary document we use to avoid probate on assets. It's so flexible. It works for a variety of assets, personal property, business assets, real estate. It's really the most flexible thing we can use. And we have hundreds of years of case law establishing using trust. So you can go back to England. We have case law from England, which is where American law comes from, the English common law, using trust to manage assets. And that's why they're so powerful and so useful and so accepted in estate planning. 4, you can make accounts payable on death. And that's something I talked about earlier. So remember that $50,000 probate limit, that's assets subject to probate. So if you have a bank account over here with $100,000, but you make it payable on death to your only child, you remove that $100,000 from this probate basket over here, $50,000. So then if you only have, let's say, a simplified example, $30,000 in equity in your house and $100,000 in that bank account, well, if you made it payable on death to your child, you remove that from that $50,000 small estate limit. So then we would just have $30,000 of equity in the house, and maybe you're convinced you're not going to get more equity than that before your death, and the child could possibly even use the transfer by affidavit method. Now, this transfer by affidavit method is designed for small estates, but I will say it's not easy. It's not super easy. Banks and other institutions don't like using them. They prefer to tell you to go to probate court because it's less work for them and feels like less liability. So they won't, blink about telling you to go spend $5-10 grand on probate for a $30,000 asset. That's just my experience, what I've seen happen. But if they have to, they will deal with a transfer by affidavit. Now, the best case where I've seen them work is with bank accounts. You can use them on real estate, things like that. The more complicated it gets, you're going to still spend time wrangling with that transfer by affidavit. So if you have significant assets, again, I recommend make it easier on your heirs. Look at setting up a trust. Have everything flow through the trust. Fifth, own property jointly. So that's another method you can avoid probate upon death, is you could own real estate, for example, as joint tenants with rights of survivorship. That means whoever survives becomes the owner of the property. And one popular way to do this in Wisconsin is married couples. They can own property as what's called survivorship marital property. And that means the spouse automatically inherits the deceased spouse interest upon death. Now, you do need to file a form with the Register of Deeds to clear title after that spouse is gone, but it's a lot simpler than going through a probate court process, and you can work with an attorney to do that by recording the form and the death certificate. And some counties have other little requirements, so check whatever county you're in. But you can own property jointly with a spouse or even a child or something like that. Now, again, I caution against that because the minute you add someone else to the title, you expose the title to claims of creditors, lawsuits, and things like that. But if you had one heir and you wanted to leave the house to them, that would be one method. Just be aware of what I mentioned earlier about divesting assets, gifting assets for Medicaid. Also, currently, there's the step up in basis. If you leave an asset when you die, they get new basis for capital gains. And if you do it during life, they take it at your basis. So for a house, I would look at transferring it either using a revocable living trust or using a transfer on death deed. If you had, in this example, one child, to get the house after death and still get that step up in basis. But again, we go back to, that's the fifth way NerdWallet mentions own property jointly. But in my opinion on the list, you can use the trust to flow all the assets through, and then you don't have to worry about doing all these different ones. If you don't use a trust, you generally need to pair 3 or 4 of these to try to get your estate below that small estate limit for probate assets, and it still might not be possible if you own real estate or significant tangible personal property, things like that. So those are the 5 ways NerdWallet discusses to mention probate. All of them work, and they depend on your specific situation, which one is best for you. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and thank you for tuning in. If this video has been helpful to you, please consider giving it a like so others can see and benefit from this information as well. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.